For today's class, we are introducing the integumentary system, and we will begin by looking at the skin structure. Integument is another name for skin. In fact, skin is the principal organ of the integumentary system. Along with skin, the integumentary system is also made of appendages that include the hair, nails, sebaceous glands, and sweat glands. The skin is the largest and one of the most important organs of the body. And in the average adult, the integumentary system covers 3,000 square inches of the surface of the body. The skin is a sheet-like organ composed of the following layers of distinct tissue. These layers are the epidermis and the dermis. The epidermis is the outermost covering. It's made up of tightly packed epithelial cells. The epidermis is avascular, meaning it does not have a blood supply. Just under the epidermis is the dermis. The dermis is made of connective tissue and has a blood supply, so it's called vascular. And you'll see here in this picture another layer that is listed, and this is called the subcutaneous tissue, or the hypodermis. But understand, although this layer is important in that it helps to support the epidermis and the dermis, the subcutaneous tissue, or hypodermis, is not considered one of the basic layers of the skin. So let's break the different layers of the epidermis down. The epidermis consists of 5 layers. And we'll discuss these layers from the most superficial, meaning the outermost layer, to the innermost layer. The outermost layer is called the stratum corneum. Just below that, you have the stratum lucidum. Next is the stratum granulosum. Below that is the stratum spinosum. And then lastly, you have the innermost layer, which is called the stratum germinativum. And this is also commonly called the stratum basal. The stratum corneum is the outermost layer, or the surface layer. And from it, dead flat cells flake off daily. And these dead flat cells, they can flake off by the thousands onto our clothes, our bath water, and even things that we handle. And this is what in part contributes to household dust. But understand that dust is not only dead flat cells, but it does consist of other things like hair, clothing fibers, bacteria, soil particles, etc. So just below that outermost layer, you have the stratum lucidum. And this is found only on the palms of the hands, the fingertips, and the soles of the feet. And interestingly, the cells that make up the stratum lucidum appear to be clear. Just below the stratum lucidum, you have the stratum granulosum. And an important note about the stratum granulosum is this is a layer where part of keratin production occurs. So what is keratin? Well, keratin is a protein that helps to form a waterproof barrier on the skin and nails. You may have heard of keratin before because it's enhanced in different hair products like shampoo or different kind of conditioning treatments. So you may have seen that term before. But some important characteristics about keratin is that it resists evaporation And by doing so, it helps to prevent excessive water loss. So we will lose water through the skin by this process of evaporation as our skin tries to help regulate our body temperature. And this keratin helps to preserve water loss that we could lose from evaporation. Keratin also serves as a protective barrier against ultraviolet light, and we get ultraviolet light from the sun. Keratin protects against bacteria. It helps protect us from different cuts or abrasions, and it also provides protection for some chemicals. The next layer is the stratum spinosum. This layer helps to give the skin strength as well as its flexible nature. And then lastly, we have the innermost layer, which is the stratum germinativum, or stratum basal. Again, this is the deepest layer of the epidermis. Now, the cells that are located within the stratum germinativum have the ability to reproduce themselves or to regenerate. And clinically, this is a very important trait of these cells because this means that the skin can repair itself when it's injured. It also means that the body is able to continue to be an effective barrier against infection. So now that we've looked at the different layers of the epidermis, we're now going to discuss 4 distinct cell types. Those types are keratinocytes, Langerhans cells, Merkel cells, and melanocytes. The cells of the epidermis, or the epidermal cells, consist of keratinocytes. And keratinocytes comprise actually most of the epidermis. That would be 80%. And they produce the protein keratin, which we already know now is an important protein that helps to give skin that waterproof characteristic. Another type of cell of the epidermis are called Langerhans cells. And these cells are important because they are macrophages. And macrophages are cells that help to protect the body against microorganisms. They are cells that remove dead organisms and foreign substances by a process called phagocytosis. The next cell type we have are called Merkel cells. And Merkel cells are important because they contain sensory receptors for touch. So we think about touch and being able to detect when things feel hot or cold, or being able to detect pressure. And those Merkel cells have those sensory receptors. And then we have melanocytes. And melanocytes are important because they are the skin color cells. They are what make protein, which is called melanin. And melanin is a pigment that gives hair, skin, and your eyes the color they have. Melanin is also important because it helps to protect the skin against ultraviolet rays of the sun. So the more melanin you have, the darker your skin color will be, and that also means that you have greater protection against those harmful UV rays. So now that we've looked at the different layers of the epidermis and the epidermal cells, we're now going to spend some time talking about the dermis, which is also called the corneum. So the dermis, remember, is going to be located just beneath the epidermis. And the dermis is much thicker than the epidermis. It contains masses of connective tissue, collagen tissue, which helps to make your skin strong and tough, and then also elastic fibers. And those elastic fibers are important because they make skin stretchable and give skin its ability to be elastic, to be able to rebound when it's being pulled. And interesting to note that when wrinkles start to develop with age, these they happen because we start to lose that elasticity with aging, and that again is what contributes to wrinkles. The dermis also contains numerous blood vessels. It has nerve endings, muscles, hair follicles, the oil and sweat glands, and also fat cells that pass through. And another interesting note about the dermis is that it contains these parallel rows of tiny bumps called dermal papillae. And these dermal papillae are ridge-like cells. And these are actually what make up your fingerprints and your footprints. The ridges and grooves also help to improve our grip and allow us to be able to walk barefoot on smooth surfaces. But those ridges are located in the dermis. And lastly, we have the subcutaneous or the hypodermal layer. So remember, this layer is not considered a layer of the skin, but rather it is a supportive layer. It helps to support the dermis and the epidermis. The subcutaneous or hypodermal layer consists of loose connective tissue and about half of the body's stored fat. It also provides a place for the integumentary system to attach to surface muscles. The hypodermal layer contains larger blood supplies and nerves. And it also, because it contains such a large amount of our body's fat, it's able to act as an insulator to help with temperature regulation so that we don't get as cold. It also serves as a site to where some injections are given. And then that stored fat that we have in the hypodermal layer can also serve as a source of energy, meaning it can be used as a food source when needed. And that concludes our first part of our discussion on the integumentary system.